Hi, welcome to Hardcover Feedback. I'm Kelly Campos.
And I'm Brandy Smits.
Today we're going to be talking about three completely different novels, a Western, a mystery, and a science fiction novel. We're going to start off with our Western. Appaloosa tells the story of lawmen for hire, Virgil Cole and Everett Hitch. And they ride into Appaloosa, which is a frontier town, suffering at the hands of Randall Bragg and his posse. Bragg killed the previous sheriff, and so Virgil and Everett step in and start laying down the law. But when Virgil's woman, Allie, is kidnapped by Bragg's men, then they have to break all the rules that they try so hard to enforce. Appaloosa. Appaloosa. What can I say about Appaloosa?
It's definitely a quick read. You will finish this book in like a day. I mean, there's just nothing really to it. It's very basic.
Right, I definitely agree. And it was enjoyable in many ways for me. It was a fun, basic Western story, you know, but it definitely followed all the points. It hit every point it needed to hit to say, I'm a Western, and it did that very nicely, I suppose.
All the stereotypical characters are all represented in all of their ways.
Exactly. They did do a few things that were interesting to me, and without giving away too much of the story, there's one character in particular, the lady of the evening, shall we say, who actually seems like the most put together character in the story, even though she's not in it very much.
She is like the overseer of everything. She knows how everyone is thinking and what everyone is actually after, and she kind of keeps everyone together knowing what's going on.
Right, and Little Miss Femme Fatale, Allie, Our Lady of the Evening, knows her deal right from the beginning, and
oh yes,
she doesn't pass anything by her. Everett and Virgil are interesting characters to me in some ways, being that even though they're very two-dimensional in a lot of ways, all of a sudden they're very smart. Like they know a lot of what were you saying, the Clausewitz and things?
Everett always talks about this German philosopher Clausewitz, and he refers to him quite numerously throughout the book, and it kind of gives Virgil Everett this like deep part where he's not just a cowboy, he actually has education. He actually went to West Point,
right?
And so
yeah.
He was a very educated cowboy in the land. So that's kind of interesting too.
Right, and there were some flavor to the book that I did enjoy as well. Some things that I didn't quite know about the frontier law, like when Bragg escaped and they went to try to hunt him down. Well, he was in another town, so they didn't have any jurisdiction anymore.
Exactly.
So they had no real right to get him, and if they took him, they were then breaking the law in another town. So that was kind of an interesting revelation, something that I didn't really know before. One thing that really bothered me about this book, though, was the short sentences. It almost read to me like a children's novel, even though it was definitely an adult novel. There were adult situations and things like that. So that might make this good for someone who is an adult just learning to read, which this would actually be a very good novel for that. But in terms of great literary value, when your main characters say, well, you know, I believe I might, and the other character responds, yep, I think you should. You know,
yep. It don't let the size like fool you. It's almost 300 pages, but it doesn't feel like it. It feels like it was like barely 100.
Right,
so.
And again, not an intimidating read for someone who has a slightly lower reading level, just learning to read. Adult literacy programs, this would probably be a very
Definitely.
good book for that, because it is high interest but low reading level.
Yes.
So that's good if that's what you're looking for. For me, it just didn't quite meet the muster of an interesting, active Western novel. It wasn't quite what I thought it would be, especially because Robert Parker has such a good track record in terms of what I've heard.
He is a very, very popular mystery writer, so it's kind of, you say maybe he's not really cut out to be a Western writer. It's very possible that this just wasn't his thing. And he tried, and it didn't really work.
Gallant effort.
Yes.
From me, I think that Appaloosa's receiving about 1.5 stars, honestly. It just didn't quite meet the muster for me.
Yeah, I think I'll give it 2 stars.
for the same reason.
Yeah,
So.
just it really wasn't that exciting, just plot-wise. I mean, it had the turns, but everything was so predictable.
Right, it was.
So-
And good thing you're saying that, because the only time that it became non-predictable was towards the very end, and it started getting very interesting, and then it ended.
Yeah.
The very last chapter, there were twists thrown in there and character development that you didn't expect, and you weren't
Exactly.
sure what was going on, and then he just ended it. It was like almost like the deadline was coming up, and he was like, "Oh, I gotta finish," you know.
can't
So
have more
I'll
than-
just end it, you know.
It was, yeah, it just it came out of nowhere, and you're like, well, now is when it's getting good. So maybe there's a sequel in progress. Who knows? But
Maybe, and
it was-
hopefully a sequel would meet the standards of that last chapter
Yes.
instead of the rest of the book.
Yes.
Which I'd read that.
I would too. I would give it a shot.
So again, Appaloosa from me is getting 1.5 stars, and from Brandy,
Definitely 2.
all right. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Hardcover Feedback. The next book we are talking about today is Dating is Murder by Harvey Jane Kozak. In this book, Wally is an avant-garde greeting card creator slash painter slash student whose friends kind of trick her into participating in this reality television show called Biological Clock, in which the premise of the show is basically to get these 6 contestants, 3 male, 3 female, and decide by audience votes which of them would be the best parents. So it's kind of cheesy. But then Wally meets Annika, a German nanny, while on the set of the show. And Annika disappears and no one can find her, but Wally decides that she's going to take it upon herself to find her because the police don't care and Annika's friends don't care, and the host family just seems that Annika is easily replaced. So many people tell her to stop looking and to just give up, but when she continues, she finds herself in the middle of an FBI investigation of an international drug cartel.
Dating
So,
is murder.
Dating is murder.
First, I really want to talk about the reality TV show that she's on. The premise itself is just funny.
It totally just represents why reality television is getting out of hand.
Oh,
and
totally.
people will go to such extreme rates to get ratings and to get people to watch their shows.
Yep. And what's so funny about this to me is not only is it talking about reality TV show and how bad the premises of a lot of these shows are, but it also talks about the behind the scenes thing. And there are 2 basically warring makeup artists, you know, and they want their candidate to win because I'm her makeup artist and that'll make me a star. So it's just really funny the way they use the show as another character, a very funny background character.
Because it's just a whole bunch of characters mixed in one, but the show itself is definitely its own entity of just insanity.
Exactly.
It's basically, that's what it is.
Exactly. And you know, Wally is a very fun character to me as well. She is smart, but she feels like she's too old to be going back to school. Like she should have did this a long time ago.
Yeah.
Like she's, you know, living the life of a 20-year-old artist, but she's not 20 anymore. You know, her biological clock is ticking. And so she feels lost in a lot of ways, but she's so smart, she's so quick, and she's such a fun person to read about that it really makes the story interesting. Even if the story was boring, her character would still be interesting to read about.
Her large phobia of math is just throughout the entire book. Every time anyone mentions math, it's like, oh, why math? Why not anything else?
And maybe it's because I also have a phobia of math.
Me too.
But I really felt a kindred spirit ship with Wally Shelley.
Oh, yes.
Now, the other things that happen in this book are also, there are no false clues in this mystery, which I thought was very good. Because so many times you read these mystery novels and they're like, oh, they mention this one character in the background one time on page 5, and then on page 800 they end up being the killer. It's like,
Where did they come from?
Exactly. But in this story, everything is laid out from the beginning. There's no false clues. When you go back and check, you're like, oh, yep, it was right there.
At the end of the book, you will want
to go back and
make
check.
sure that everything lines up, because it's just, the ending is so unbelievable.
Exactly. And again, without giving anything away, the people in this story are so richly detailed. They're her friends, you know, Joey and Frederique. Frederique is the makeup artist as well for her, and so she is gung-ho to make Wally a star.
She has that theory that all the casinos in Vegas are wagering over which of the 3 women are going to win the show, and it's just, no one cares who's going to win the show.
About this show.
But apparently, there's mob men in Vegas who are
gunning for particular people to win this show, and that's why Annika's disappeared and all this. She ties all these disparate things in with Annika's disappearance just because she has a conspiracy theory that she says this is what happened. But really, it's nothing whatsoever to do with that. And there's this really very dangerous drug cartel involved.
You're like, okay, well, what does that have to do with anything? And then
you find
you
out,
got it,
and you're like, oh, okay. I also thought it was interesting, the police presence in the story, because the police don't really have much to do with solving the crime because of their strictures and their red tape and everything like that. But they are very good. The characters they bring up are very good people.
It's the problem that Annika is German, so then she really doesn't have the protection of the police. It's really complicated.
Right.
So as much as Wally keeps going back to Officer Szymanski to get help, he really can't do much, even though, you know, all he wants is a date. But
right. And speaking of dates, through the book, again, shying away from saying too much, there's a gentleman named Simon who comes into play, who's a very handsome, very mysterious man who you can't tell whether he wants to kill Wally or wants to kiss her. And for those of you who love romance in your mysteries, this is good for that, because it's not a romance novel that has a little bit of mystery. It's a mystery novel that has a little bit of romance thrown in.
And it's not overly done.
It's not overly done
that's
at
nice
all.
too.
And it makes you go, ooh, that's kind of cool. You know? So all in all, what was your overall impression of this book?
I really like this book. I got the twists and turns, and I remember finishing before you and just going, are you done yet? Are you done yet? I have to talk about this with you. So it definitely hits you, and there's characters that you love, and it'll make you laugh out loud, and it was great. How about you?
I totally agree. It was a novel that, like you said, once I finished it, I'm like, wait, where's Brandy? I have to call her so we can talk about this book, because it was such a shocking ending. But again, all the ducks were in a row, so it made so much sense. All in all, this book, which we must mention is actually a sequel, which neither one of us knew.
And neither of us read the first one either, so it's
exactly.
kind of
so that's
interesting.
good to know that it's a standalone sequel. You don't have to have read the first one to read this one.
Right.
But all in all, I think I have to give this book 3.5 stars. It was right up there. It was a very, very entertaining novel.
I agree. It was really good. I'm going to give it 3 stars today.
All right.
So
we'll be back in just a few minutes. Welcome back. The last book that we will be discussing today is entitled Uglies by Scott Westerfeld. Very, very interesting science fiction novel. Uglies brings up this thought. Everybody gets to be supermodel gorgeous. What could possibly be wrong with that? Well, a lot. Tally is about to be 16, and when she turns 16, then she can get the operation to become pretty. Well, she spends most of her time right now staring across the river at New Pretty Town, and that's the place where your only job is to have fun and be pretty. Well, soon she meets this girl named Shay, who Shay is also still ugly like her because they have not reached 16 yet. Shay teaches her how to hoverboard And she also shows her that there just might be more to life than becoming pretty. Well, when Shay runs away and with the mysterious David, then the authorities offer Tally one option. She can, or two options rather. She can either find Shay and turn her in, or she can stay ugly forever. Uglies.
So what'd you think?
This novel was, again, very interesting science fiction novel. For the same reason that I enjoyed Jennifer Government, I enjoy this one, in that it has a very richly detailed world that is not too far away from where we are now in terms of how we view things. Once these people turn 16 and they can have this completely pervasive surgery that turns them pretty. Not only are they physically pretty, it's a scientific pretty. It makes the eyes larger so that you look like you're vulnerable and people want to protect you. You know, they studied what makes you pretty and what's good about that, and that's what they make you into. Which on the surface, it's like, well, that's kind of cool. You know, I wouldn't mind being cute all the time, you know. But it's also a very, very scary thing. You know, it makes everybody the same. It makes sure there's no differences between people because that's what causes hate. And it takes out a lot of what makes us human in order just to be pretty. You know, which is a very iffy kind of thing, you know.
Well, it basically removes any kind of discrimination or racism or anything from the world because there is no different cultures. There are no, you know, only black people or only white people. It's all, everyone's the same. Mm-hmm. And it kind of just, everything that society is built on today where it comes to everyone is proud of their own culture and stuff like that is taken away, and you don't have one anymore. You're given your appearance.
Right.
And you can plan, like they have this little computer game where you can plan what you want to look like when you're pretty, but in the end, it's still them who want to decide, and you can't do anything about it.
Right, it's a very homogenized culture in that way. But it's also a very interesting one because it is a post-apocalyptic culture, and something happened with oil that explodes in the cars, and that's something that happened in the distant past.
It was a virus that affected oil and gasoline and stuff like that, and basically made it unstable. And I think the example they used was it became like phosphorus, where it hits oxygen and it immediately just explodes in flames.
Right.
And so everything that our society is based on, with cars and heat with oil and stuff like that, is gone, and there's nothing left. And they refer to our generation as the Rusties because everything that we have is built with steel and iron and stuff like that. And it's not the same anymore. Everything is reusable. There's solar energy, hydroelectric power. Nothing is any gas. It's all just reusable.
Right, which that portion of it is a very promising future. You know, if we could get to that point, then that would be awesome. They also have these really cool hoverboards, which are integral to the story as you go farther in, where they're like skateboards, except they run off of these magnetic fields, which there's magnets or metal underneath the city, and you can go wherever there's metal underneath and thing. Now, and Shay uses that to show Tally the Rustyville and the outside world, which begins to open up Tally's eyes to nature and things like that. And when the authorities grab her and say, look, you're gonna stay ugly forever unless you turn in Shay, unless you go find her and turn her in, then she goes on this 7-day, 10-day journey
10 days,
to try to find the Smoke. Now, the Smoke is the town that these people live in who don't have the pretty surgery, and they are running away from the law, basically. If the law finds them, then they will have to become pretty because it's mandatory that you have this pretty surgery. So Tally goes to try to find them, and she thinks she's gonna hate it there. She thinks that everybody's gonna be bad and ugly, and she can't wait to turn them in so she can become pretty. But she finds a lot of really good things there. You know, a lot of very interesting people, and she works harder than she's ever worked before, but she feels better about herself. And it's such an interesting storyline to see how she changes through here, and yet it all still goes bad. You know, she still ends up doing what she didn't really end up wanting to do, which is turn these people in. and how that affects her to try to go fix it again. You know, and the gadgets and everything, though.
Their entire lifestyle is based upon the magnets and then the reusable things. So like everyone has like a water purifier, which you can use to purify anything, including, you know, urine, but that's not important. And you use this water purifier so you can survive on your own. You also have dehydrated food that if you put just a little bit in, and they all have like, you know, bizarre names like spag bowl,
which is spaghetti bolognese, I think, short for that.
Everything is just, you know, an entire meal is in this little packet.
Little packet and container. And one thing that Tally finds out when she's in the smoke, before she turns people in, which she doesn't really mean to do by this point, is she finds out that there's side effects to becoming pretty.
Yes.
And this is where the story really turns on its head. When you find out what these side effects are, then you're really like, oh, okay, now I see why it's bad. Because you know that it's a dystopian future. You know it's gotta be because of the tone of it, but you don't really know why. You still think, well, what's wrong with being pretty? What's wrong with that? And this is where you find out. And that's really where the story grabs me, because I was already enthralled with the writing style and the world that Mr. Westerfeld built. But that is really where they grabbed me and said, I have to finish this one so I can read the next one, because this is the first in three.
Yes.
Right.
It's the uglies, then the pretties, and then the specials. Which
right.
the specials are the authority figure. That it's like the police of the area, and they have instituted like kind of like an elusive behavior. No one really thinks that they exist. If you ask any pretties if the specials exist, they're like, no, they're not real. And suddenly they appear to Tally, and all of her doubts are gone, and it kind of proves that this really isn't a perfect society. There really is something lying underneath, and these people are hiding it.
Right. Now, all in all, the main overlying thing of this is the meaning of beauty and what really is pretty, whether it's outside or inside or something, which I think is a very, very important subject, but it's done in such a way that it makes it so enthralling and interesting. I can't do anything other than give this book 4 stars. Can't do anything other than that.
I think I'm going to give it 3.5. I don't know. I think I'm going to go with 3.5.
Okay.
But I definitely agree with the beauty thing, though, because it's proven that, you know, with like David, who's not a pretty, she realizes that even though he's not what she has learned to be attractive, he grows on her.
Right.
And it's a really interesting thing.
So all in all, 4 stars for me, 3.5 from you. Sounds good.
Yeah.
All right. And now to recap 3 novels that we did today. Appaloosa by Robert B. Parker. I gave it 1.5 stars, and Brandy gave it 2. Dating is Murder by Harvey Jane Kozak. I gave it 3.5 stars, and Brandy gave it 3. Uglies by Scott Westerfeld received 4 stars from me and 3.5 from Brandy. Thank you so much for being with us today, and we will see you next time.